I'm on. Okay. So, boy, I've got wires hanging everywhere. We need a sound man, apparently. So, I'm Bill Gardner, and most of you know me from Digital Forensics and Information Assurance degree program here at Marshall University. So, today, I'm going to sit down. I got bad knees. Can you see me on the video? So, we're going to talk about Russian hacking. So what is this story about Russia hacking the election? So everyone's heard this, right? So what actually happened? Well, let's talk about what actually happened and talk about the narrative that we need to be concerned about and sort of debunk some of the other narratives that are out there. So basically, how Russia hacked our elections, not really about hacking. It is to some extent, but it's more about information warfare and cyber warfare. Nation state against nation state. And so basically how this was done, according to the intelligence community, there's a joint report released by FBI, NSA, DIA, and CIA, which said that a Russian agent or someone, a hacker under Russian control, broke into John Podesta's email, who was the chairman of the DNC and head of Hillary's campaign, and stole a bunch of email. And at the same time, the Russians are well known for cyber operations, especially cyber warfare. The Ukraine, in March of 2015, it's been alleged, and people have said they found proof that the Russians took down the Ukrainian power grid. Matt Perry was talking about this earlier about how he went through his users and disabled their macros because the attack vector here was macro. So they basically sent out Microsoft Office files and told people to enable macros so that they could. It was supposed to be parts of the utility operation. But anyway, that's how they got pwned, and that's allegedly the foothold they used in order to take down the Ukrainian power grid. Russia has a long history of cyber warfare. There's the 2007 disagreement with Estonia, where a Russian war, the Russian hero war statue was in every Soviet bloc country. It was a tribute to Great Mother Russia and how they'd send their troops to liberate them with communism. Well, the Estonians, after the breakup of the Soviet Union, said, we want this thing out of our town square. And when they actually moved it, there were some hard feelings. So in this attack, Russia basically knocked Estonia offline for a number of days. Estonia is an especially wired country. So banks were knocked offline, newspapers, television. I mean, to me, that's the most disconcerting thing. You imagine waking up tomorrow, wake up tomorrow, the power being out would be pretty bad. But if you woke up tomorrow and none of your devices would give you any news about what was going on in the world, and then you went to get money out of the bank and you can't, that is kind of disconcerting. And they're able to do it with a country like Estonia because it's relatively small. Also, in the Georgian conflict in 2008, Russian cyber campaign actually took down Georgian targets, including defacements of the Georgian parliament website. This is water, not vodka, by the way. And denial of service attacks. So most of the time what they're trying to do here is disrupt information. So in the case study we're going to use to look at this Russian hacking allegation is the Democratic National Committee. So John Podesta's email was accessed by an attacker or attackers using phishing. And And basically what they did was they attacked the weakest link. You know, attackers don't break in through firewalls anymore. They're going to try to bypass your next generation firewall and the billions of dollars that you spent putting blinky-like boxes at your network perimeter. They're going to attack the user because the user is the weakest link. Because people will always make mistakes. People will always fall for tricks, for social engineering. So how this happens, the attacker goes through the following phases. There's a phase of information gathering, attack planning, and then finally attack execution. So background, an attacker will look at an organization and use open source intelligence, so this is publicly available information, to find a number of employees, locations, job openings, the names of the executives so they could be targeted, email formats, and also current events. We have a very good example of a current event that would probably make people click on the links. What if you got an email this morning that said actual footage of Tomahawk missiles hitting Syria? Would you be interested enough to click on that? If there's not already a phishing campaign using that, there will be soon. Because what phishers want to do or attackers want to do is to compel you. They're going to sort of reach for your gut and say, you know, hey, you need to look at this. There's a need for you to look at this, which will overpower your other sense of I shouldn't be clicking on links I don't know where they go. And, you know, sometimes clicking on the link wins out. I mean, I've been phished because I was compelled by the link. So we had a talk on Tuesday by one of my students who's doing a phishing campaign for Marshall Health, and one of the complaints that the target of the internal phishing campaign is, of course, security awareness, but they complained that, you know, phishing campaigns would not be that sophisticated. And if you look at a nation-state-backed phishing campaign, it's going to be very sophisticated because it's got billions of dollars and, you know, tens of thousands of people behind it. Not everything is going to be an offer from some prince in Africa to give you money. Some phishing campaigns are very, very sophisticated. Social media websites are good for information gathering, and if you go to the organization and find an individual, you can drill down. So, do they have Facebook? Do they have LinkedIn? Do they have Twitter? Do they have a Grindr profile? I mean, you just keep going on. You all either are asleep or don't appreciate my jokes. So you can find out about people. Has anyone taken those surveys of what's your favorite color? What street did you grow up on? Where did you go to grade school? What's your mother's maiden name? I mean, they might as well just ask what your freaking social security number and password is, right? And I see a number of people take those. I've seen security professionals take those because they're compelled. They're bored. They want to interact with other people. And it's very easy. It's sort of like the copy and paste stuff that goes around on Facebook. You know, in the 1990s, all we had was chainmail, which was where somebody would see something funny and then they send it to all their friends and then they would send it to all their friends. Now with social media, that gets optimized by the ability to reach tens of people or thousands of people pretty quickly. So if that's weaponized in some way, you can pretty quickly put a malicious link or something that might cause data leakage in front of people through social media. Apparently, I need to know. Okay. So the other thing is Google hacking. There's a very good book by Johnny Long on Google hacking. Has anyone read that book? Which is not about hacking Google, but using search terms to find sensitive information. And it's not in the slide, but I think another one that's really great is Shodan. If you don't know how to use Shodan, if you're a network defender, figure it out soon, because it can really give you a great insight on what you might have on the internet that you don't know about. The recent example that I've used is, do a search for your state and search for Windows XP, and you'll find, now some of those are false positive, but you'll find 150 some just for West Virginia alone. So this is what happened. March the 19th of last year, there was an email sent to Mr. Podesta that said that someone has his password. So, I mean, this is pretty good, right? It has the Google logo on it. It's got red. It's got blue. It's got a little blue box that you click to check your link, to change your password. Does anyone see anything fishy about this? I'm sorry. Would you like to walk up to the board and take a look at it? So anyway, what we have here is a sophisticated attack. They're hitting all the right notes. There's no misspellings. It looks really good. It led to a bit.ly link, which led to a server in Russia, which has been dubbed by the antivirus people as Fancy Bear APT28 or So Fancy. There needs to be a Rosetta Stone of these different names that antiviruses give the malware, because it becomes a marketing campaign. Also, I'm trademarking the term APT69, so I have prior art. This is actually proof of prior art. This chair's squeaking. I thought for a minute I was hallucinating. So the only defense against these sorts of attacks is social engineering. So Mr. Podesta was, clicked on the link, and so what happens is now they gain access to his computer, wherever it is. It could have already been on the DNC network. It could have been in his house. It could have been in a hotel. Either way, if it's outside the network, he then goes home or goes back to DNC, plugs it into the DNC network, and then it starts to propagate. So what the attackers were able to take was just a bunch of freaking emails. And then they went through the email, and then it was leaked to WikiLeaks. And the attacker is known as Guccifer 2.0, who says he's Romanian. He's not affiliated with the Russians, but based upon the intelligence community's assessment, they say he is. And I say it's probably still open to question. But I'm stating the facts here. I'm not making a judgment if he is or he is not employed by the Russians. Either way, there was an effect on the election of some type. Now, there are some people who say that it's overblown, that this sort of thing and the whole alt-right campaign, which I'm going to talk about in a second, Pepe, had no effect on the election. I think it's open for debate as well. The only defense is user education. If you go out and look at Boris Sverdlik's talk or the work by Casey Urid on social engineering, they've done a really good job of talking about defending against social engineering, and you should definitely go check it out. And one of the things that I talk about, when I talk about social engineering, is we all have different learning styles. Some people are visual, some people are audio, are better at listening, physical, etc. So basically what this boils down to is the lecture is dead, which is kind of funny because I'm sitting up here lecturing to you. But hands-on training is a lot better than listening to somebody talk about it. Amanda, I think, left, but she had some good examples of security awareness training. One of our other speakers, Tess, has basically built a security awareness culture in her organization, and you do that by having a good internal marketing campaign. She makes it fun. So, for example, in the summer in July, they have a cookout. And the cookout is themed about security awareness. And you have prizes and all that sort of thing. Security awareness is not something you can do once and it sticks. If you're not doing it when you onboard people, you're making the first mistake there. If you do it once a month or once a quarter or once a year, you're also, I believe, missing the point. It has to be a constant message. It also has to be a constant message without making people tired of the message. And there was a recent study from the UK saying that the people have just entered this space of malaise. And what you need to do is social engineer your users to be more secure, right? You want to trick your users into being more secure. If you preach at people, I mean, if you got kids, how do they react when you preach to them? Oh, I've heard that before. And that our users are becoming that way about security awareness, about phishing. How many times can you tell people not to click on stuff? There needs to be a better, more targeted, and more sophisticated message as we move forward. Also hands-on. Does anyone have an example of a good security awareness hands-on exercise? Well, if you're doing a phishing campaign, that's usually pretty hands-on. When they click on a link and they realize they're not going to get free baseball tickets, but it actually takes them to an awareness page where they can read about it. The other thing I have to say about awareness is that, this is the Dave Kennedy version, is if your salesman that makes you most money in your corporation gets phished, are you going to fire them? Well, hell no. You're throwing the baby out the bathwater. You're going to keep that person. You're going to educate that person. So it's all about education. This is all about learning styles. So in my example of a hands-on exercise, instead of telling users what a good password policy is, have them develop a good password. And there's some different sites you can use, or you could just sit down with them and they say, well, what about this password, or what about this password? And then also when you do your own penetration test, you can just go ahead and probably guess their password. You also might want to talk about password policies and why we have them. So it's more than just saying we need to do X. It's about explaining why we do X, and as a result, people will be more willing to do it. The other thing is you need to explain to users that you're not just guarding corporate or organizational data, you're guarding their data. In order for you to work at an organization, they have to collect personal information about you. Social security number, where you live, your bank account so you can get direct deposit, your kids' names, your kids' social security numbers. Do you want to protect that? You have some skin in the game. You're personally invested when you realize that your data is there with everyone else's data, and it's just as important. The other thing is you need to talk about what malware actually does and what it's targeted to do. A lot of people think, oh, malware, I'm going to get a virus and it's going to slow down my computer. If that's the worst thing that happens, you're pretty well off. Usually what will happen if your computer starts to slow down, it's this poorly written malware or you're part of a botnet. And the sort of ironic thing is that a lot of older people just go buy a new computer, and of course they log in using and then do the same thing that they did before, and then it gets gummed up with malware, so they go buy another computer. They make Walmart a lot of money doing this. So you need to educate users what malware is actually doing. So is an attacker putting you into a botnet? Are they attempting to hide credit card data that they stole someplace else on your computer so they can move it to the dark web to sell it? So we have to think the reason, what are attackers after? We explain why attackers are after. Another hands-on is to have the trainees read the organization's security policies, and then reflect on why these policies are in place. So, who's read Marshall University's security policies? Tisk, tisk, tisk. They're not just for system administrators and security folks. If you're a user of Marshall's network, of course, there's not a lot of students in here, you need to read those. Actually, use Marshall's security policies as examples of my network administration class so that people can write their own policies based upon their fictitious company they come up with. So the case study, again, is the DNC hack, and the intelligence report, which is the IAC 2017-01D, Intelligence Community Assessment, Assessing Russian Activities and Intentions in Recent Elections. So they come to a conclusion. Their conclusion is that basically there was an information warfare campaign. Part of that information warfare campaign was based upon John Podesta's email. Part of that information warfare campaign was the release of information to WikiLeaks in order to embarrass Hillary Clinton's campaign. And the former administration thought this was important enough to release it. It is very rare to see intelligence of this nature released. But I think that what the former administration was trying to do was trying to clarify the narrative. Did the Russians hack the election? No, they didn't hack the election. They tried to influence the election. Some people say that they did influence the election. Whether if Guccifer 2.0 works for the Russians or not, it still happened. And there has to be a reason that it happened. And the only reason that people can point back to is the Russians are trying to influence the outcome of our election. The other thing is that we're sitting around having this conversation is enough to say that they influenced the election. Did we sit down in 1976 and talk about how China got Jimmy Carter elected? No. But yet, I'm sure information warfare was in play in 1976 as it is in play now. Information warfare has gone on forever. There are entire units of the U.S. Army that do nothing but information warfare. So propaganda, public opinion propaganda, was a great class that I took as an undergraduate. What we're seeing as a manifestation is this, and it's sort of bubbled to the top. And as a result, it is confused and upset a lot of people. And that in itself is the goal, one of the goals of information warfare. Yes, you in the black shirt.
The thing that always gets me about this, when people argue about this, don't realize that the Russians were really just hands back what we did then in their election in 2011. The New York Times article, I'm going to pull up right now if I was to go to school. Putin in hands, Clinton incited unrest over voting. And this was back before Clinton was Secretary of State. She, Secretary of State's office, launched a campaign to keep Clinton elected in 2011, according to the Russians. This is an article from 2011, not from now.
Yeah. So in 2011, the Russians caught then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. I'm reading this back so that people on the video can hear it. Of trying to promote unrest to make sure that Mr. Putin was not reelected. And that's probably the reason, the motive behind this. Is that what you're saying?
That's what
the New York Times is saying.
Of course, this article was written in 2011.
Right, the article was written in 2011 as well. We've done this for years. Is anyone familiar with the rise of the Shah of Iran? That was all CIA backed. We had this war in Vietnam where basically the leaders of South Vietnam was appointed by CIA. We have meddled in other people's politics forever. That's what NSA, CIA do. That's their job. NSA's job is signal intelligence. CIA's job is covert intelligence and human intelligence. If they weren't doing this, they wouldn't be doing their jobs. So I don't think it should be shocking to anybody that one country is trying to influence the election in another country. But it's very clear, based upon the report and also the recent testimony of the head of the FBI, Comey, that the Russians did not penetrate our election systems, such as voter registration and voting systems, but they were attacked, which is also probably happens every day. I mean, if you look, I always tell people who are new to security to sit down, even at your home network, and look at your firewall logs. There are so many automated attacks out there, and there's always somebody hammering down the door, or trying to hammer down the door. Now, if you see a lot of these and you can find some sort of pattern, and that's what it appears to have happened here. The other problem is attribution. You know, attribution's a hard problem. I can write, right now I could go on this computer, spin up a VPS in Japan, and launch attacks against wherever in the world, and then go, oh my God, the Japanese are attacking me. Now, there are forensic ways of going back and figuring out who that was, but it's not always clear. It's many times muddy. And now, with the release of the CIA Vault, is it Vault 7? They actually have tools that are made to confuse attribution. We all joke about the attribution dice. I used to have some. Let's roll the attribution dice. Was it North Korea? If it were up to Mandy, China would have done everything. Here's the other issue in this case, which I will raise. The actual forensics was not done by the FBI on the DNC servers or the DNC computers. It was done by CrowdStrike. And then that information, that forensics investigation, was handed over to the FBI. And when Comey testified before Congress, they're like, why wasn't the FBI involved? And the reply was because our people said it was just as good. Beware of the cyber military industrial complex. When you're making foreign policy decisions based upon the attribution of a private company who is trying to please shareholders, I think there should be some sort of question about that. And if you're a law enforcement agency, you probably should follow up with your own investigation. The FBI is a law enforcement agency. It's scary to me, I'm not saying CrowdStrike did anything wrong, but it's just scary to me that we can have a private organization come do forensics. Oh, yeah, well, this is it. We know this is it because it's just as good. I don't know if we can say that, especially when you're using that to make foreign policy decisions. So let me talk about, I'm good on time. Now I'm going to talk about the second part of this. I'm going to talk about the alt-right, and I'm going to talk about hacktivism. So hacktivism is hacking for political means. We all have heard of Anonymous, right? So Anonymous carried on a number of different operations, starting with Operation Chinology. Operation Chinology was, there was this video of Tom Cruise just acting kind of weird, was released. It was an internal Scientology video. It was released to the internet. Scientology, using their usual tactics of scary lawyers and threatening letters, were able to start taking these videos down. But there's this place called B on 4chan, which is the random channel, which is inhabited by a bunch of internet trolls and malcontents. And they said, well, every time it gets taken down, we're putting it back up somewhere. To the point where Gawker actually got a copy of the video, put it on their website, and under the video it said, if you want us to take this down, you're going to have to send the FBI to come seize our servers. So then it became a free speech issue. So Chinology was the first real hacktivism as far as Anonymous goes. There's other hacktivist operations out there. There were denial of service attacks in in Germany around 2000 because I believe it was Lufthansa was using their planes to deport immigrants.
I think before, I don't believe even before technology, they were going after competitors.
Yeah, 4chan did work with purveyors of child porn in the past. So, there's this whole, we're from the internet, we're here to help. Chronology was the beginning. We had Sony, we had Operation Payback, where basically this group of people on the internet wanted to make things right, in their mind, right. But in the process of doing that, some of them broke some laws. Now, you don't have to be a hacker to be a member of Anonymous. And some members of Anonymous join for a specific operation and then leave because they don't agree with the next operation. A lot of people left after Chronology because what happened next was the WikiLeaks controversy, where you could no longer give money to WikiLeaks through PayPal, MasterCard, or Visa. So, people on 4chan and people in Anonymous are like, well, I can give money to the KKK and the neo-Nazi organizations of America. What's the difference between them and WikiLeaks? And this also goes back to the whole information wants to be free, which is one of the basic values of hacker culture, right? So WikiLeaks is making information free. I can't give money to them anymore, yet I can go out and buy T-shirts with hateful writing on it from the KKK or whomever. So they basically took their matters in their own hands and launched denial of service attacks against Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal. And took them offline. In Charleston, at that time I was working in a law firm, it actually knocked our network offline. So I lost communications with 2 of our offices. Couldn't communicate with them because the denial of service attack was affecting other network activities. If you went down Capitol Street to have lunch, you could not use a credit card or a bank card because all of the point-of-sale systems have been knocked offline. So this happened over the course of a few days. PayPal, MasterCard, and Visa all reversed their decision. You could give money to WikiLeaks again. So, hooray, we're the heroes of the internet. So what we have are basically trolling, denial of service attacks, and web defacements. In the case of Operation Sony, there was a hacker named George Hotz. George Hotz was the first hacker to jailbreak the iPhone. And he wanted to do the same thing with his PlayStation, and Sony sued him. So Anonymous went after Sony. We're not talking about the North Korea hack. People get confused. We're talking about Anonymous going after Sony for threatening to sue or actually suing George Hotz. I think there was actually a suit filed. In that case, they started defacing Sony websites across the world. And finally, they broke into the PlayStation Network and took it down for months. They also helped themselves to some credit card information. But in the end, they had proved their point. The lawsuit against Mr. Hotz was broken, and everyone went on their way. Now you ask what happened to the people who did this. I don't think they ever caught the people who did Operation Sony. They did catch a lot of people who were doing denial of service attacks because they were downloading a piece of software called Low Earth Ion Cannon. It's basically a push-button script kitty tool where you put in the web address and you push go, and it would launch denial of service attacks. And they're kind of famous now. They're called the PayPal 14. They were indicted. There were a number of hearings. All of them pled out to very small charges in the end. But they actually, I think Brian Mettenbrink did a year or 2 in jail. And after he got out, he couldn't touch a computer. So he's like, how am I supposed to look for a job if I can't touch a computer? So some of these people went to jail. But anyway, what I'm getting to is if you look the alt-right, they are the mirror image of Anonymous. You look at Weave and Stormfront, They are a mirror image of B. Now, Gabrielle Coleman, who does a lot of writing on hackers and activists, disagrees with me. But she calls it the weapons of the geek. If you look at the weapons of the geek, which is trolling, denial of service attacks, trolling in itself was used as an information warfare campaign. If I yell Pepe to you, what do you think? You know, the internet frog was turned into a hate symbol. So if I say Pepe, is that... Well, I'm no way saying, but they're able to take a innocuous internet meme and turn it into something it was not. In itself, it's information warfare. So, Gabrielle Coleman and other people who've written about Anonymous says that that the alt-right had no effect. The problem really is not this magic bullet theory of communications, where I was like, oh, Pepe, oh yeah, I love Trump. That's not what happened. You have Pepe, you have all this information, this hate speech that got passed down from person to person, call it multi-step flow in communications. So it gets mangled again. You don't know where some of this information comes from. So by the time you get it, the information gets 3 or 4 people, not 3 or 4, maybe 20 people down the line, they've got some narrative that's come actually from a freaking hate site. So I think that the alt-right did have an effect, but not a direct effect on the election. And it's pretty obvious. Where does Weave live? Ukraine, right? Weave is as a nationalist. He's a white nationalist. He gets along with the Russians who invaded and the people who want to the rebels in Ukraine. They get along. So I'm not saying that Weave works for the Russian government, but they are pretty well aligned. And there are other people pretty well aligned as well who may not be direct agents of the Russian government, but they have been working as agents of the Russian government. And the weirdest thing to me is the people who were formerly identified as anonymous hate this report. They say that Guccifer 2.0 is just some hacker. That's fine. And they also say that WikiLeaks is just exposing the truth. That is also true. But you can't look at that in a vacuum and not understand that an election was affected through the leaks, through the trolling, web defacements, and the use of memes. In December of 2016, CrowdStrike actually found malware that was used, which was similar, called Fancy Bear, which resulted in heavy losses of howitzers in the Ukrainian war with Russian-backed separatists. What they did was they were able to there was basically an Android or an iPhone app where you could use to target your artillery, and it cut the amount of time to calculate, how high you raise the barrel and all that sort of thing. And they were able to use this malware to target the artillerymen who were using it. And the result is, according to CrowdStrike, heavy losses. And that was Russian-backed, because these were originally Russian artillery. The app was written by a Russian, so they just basically weaponized it and used it. And the point of this is just to point out that the Russians are not afraid to use these sort of cyber means, information warfare, etc., in order to achieve their goals. Does anyone have any questions? This is worse than teaching in the afternoon. Everyone's going. Okay. Thank you for coming. And for those of you who get to listen to me talk all the time, I'm sorry.